Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sea Trade Cruise Talks. Today, we will talk about responsible tourism and regenerative travel. I'm Danai, founder and CEO of ArtLink, an art entrepreneurship whose work in the hospitality industry spans, I think, 37 countries by now and growing. Curating and providing art and craft collections to over 150 hotels and cruise ships over about a quarter of a century has provided us with unique angles of view on cultural sustainability and regeneration, views that I would like to further explore today. So with me today are David Leventhal, who after spending a considerable number of years in sales and marketing of emerging media and technology, made a shift in life to focus on real estate and hospitality that promotes regenerative environmental and social impact. David, as he defines himself, is a slow money entrepreneur who 15 years ago co-founded Playa Viva, which he calls a luxury sustainable resort community. He endeavors to leverage hospitality and real estate investments to improving the ecosystem of both people and planet and create vibrant, resilient, healthy, and profitable systems for all participants. Erik Johanssen, founder and creative director of hospitality design studio Stylt in Gothenburg, Sweden. Stylt combines concept development, interior architecture, design, and branding to create unique hotel and restaurant experiences all over the world. Erik is also co-founder and co-owner of Paternoster, a barren lighthouse turned boutique hotel on the remote island of Hamensacka, I probably mispronounce it, in Sweden.
Very.
Thank you. You'll get a chance to fix it afterwards. And last but not least, Jonathon Day, Associate Professor in Purdue's School of Hospitality and Tourism Management, with over 25 years experience in tourism management, an award-winning marketer. Jonathon has worked with destinations marketing organizations in Australia, New Zealand, and the Americas. And in recent years, Jonathon's work has focused on sustainable tourism and responsible travel. His work focuses on how tourism can be used to not only enrich travelers, but support destination communities. So, with no further ado, why won't I start with a question to you, Jonathon, so that you put us academically into the sphere of this talk. There is a quote attributed to Chief Seattle, and he said, "Take only memories, leave only footprints." Now, I was wondering, is the concept of regenerative tourism indeed a new phenomena, or is it just a new name to a concept and practice that has been with us for a very, very long time?
Yeah, that is a great quote. And I think that it really is at the center of this conversation about what is sustainability and what is regenerative. What is the regenerative movement doing and why is it different? For many years, we've been talking about sustainability, and sustainability is hard work. It requires sort of thinking about, not only the environmental impacts, but the social impacts and the economic contributions that an activity takes place. But it's dissatisfying in some ways. There is a movement that sort of says that sustainability is not as aspirational as it should be, is not trying to reach higher. And so, while there is, while I would be the first one to say that our work in sustainability is critical, the criticism of it is that it's talking about just not doing bad things. If we can not do bad things, and then at least we can continue in our tourism. And regenerative tourism is about actually saying, you know, we want to do more than that. We actually want to make the place better. Now, sustainability can embrace that, but this conversation about regenerative travel, I think really embodies it. It's about how do we make these places better? And so, you know, the Chief Seattle quote, you know, leave only footprints. I'm told, and I'm not 100% certain about this, that there's a Girl Scout motto that is about leaving the place better. And so the difference between regenerative and sustainability may be that instead of just leaving our footprints and not doing bad, the regenerative is about leaving the place better and actually making it better as we go through the process. So yeah, I think that we're building on sustainability, and no one's sort of saying that sustainability as a process and a system should, you know, is being replaced by regenerative. But I think that there's this incredible energy around taking that knowledge that we have for sustainability and taking it to the next level. We want to build back better, and we've all had, you know, 12, 18 months to sort of think about what would the world look like if it came back better than it was, and a moment of time to be thinking about what that is. And now I think, you know, and we're seeing it in conversations like this all around the place, is how can we make tourism a better system than it was before the pandemic, and this brief pause that we have to reflect.
You know, it's interesting because yes, we are all talking about the fact that we were given a gift, in a sense, of a time to reflect, both internally and externally, and maybe be able to make changes and take advantage of that time that we were given. But I cannot stop but wonder if our drive to sustain and regenerate comes from genuine desire to secure a better world for future generations, or from a no less genuine desire to feel that we are doing the right thing. And I think David and Erik, both of you have definitely stepped over and done the right thing, and you've been doing it for a number of years. What do you think? Where does it come from? What is the real essence of it, or is it a combination of the two?
Maybe I could try. I think it's obviously a combination of many things, but I think it's a big shift in consumer behavior the last 30 years, but maybe also, you know, definition of luxury, which was much more connected to things further back, and today it's more the collection of emotions and you know, poetic experiences, and that's like granting you the value of what the Rolex watch used to do. And that in combination maybe is also a little bit of the same thing. It's some kind of a big corporation fatigue that it tends to be huge corporations. You've seen through the idea that they are their bigger goal is to, you know, satisfy the shareholders. It's not that's like overshadowing everything, and I think that's why it feels to get today so much better to go and buy bread from a baker that you see actually that have flour on her or his hands, as opposed to buy bread at some large Tesco or whatever they are called. So I think as a vacation, if you go to somewhere far away and on an airplane, and you see proofs and you meet people that you feel that my trip was actually increasing their quality of life, and I learned something from it, and then it's a better vacation, then it's a better experiences because of the reasons I said before. So I think it's genuine, and I think it's like if you as a touristical business owner understands this, the mechanisms behind, then it's easier to hit the target. And I think if you are a human being and you have to create a business idea, if you follow your gut instincts, that it will lead you there, because that's how the state of the planet is. Even I think the COVID has like increased it and made or not increased it, but accelerated that change, as it has for many other things. But so that's at least my statement. I think it is really natural. If you feel inside your chest, that will kind of lead you there. I don't know if you understood, but
no, I think it's definitely clear. Out of the two options, if I understood correctly, you pick up the right thing to do more than planning for future generations, and the second one comes as a result of the first. David, what's your take on it?
Well, I mean, I'd love to take a step back to the Chief Seattle statement, because I think that's a great way of setting up the question about regeneration. If in an ideal world we were all walking down a path that had followed that advice, that'd be okay. But the reality is, when we walk down paths, they're just covered with litter right now, and people left a lot more than footprint. As Bill Reed told me when we first went down this regenerative journey, 99% of the places that we go into have been touched and degraded by humans in some form or fashion. And so the role of regeneration is to walk into that trail with a backpack and start picking up all that trash that was left behind, and then take it a step further to putting those signs at the entrance saying, don't leave any trash behind, having the trash receptacle there, it not be trash, but waste management, so you can separate the trash right at the beginning, and then go all the way back down the trail to where people are getting their bottles and getting them, bottles. That's what regeneration's about. And, I think, Jonathon, you alluded to something very important there, which is the aspirational nature of it, which I really appreciate. And I think the other part of this is words matter. I think as American, we saw this very recently over the last 4 years. Words matter. And what sustainability says, unfortunately, even though it's doing all these great things and it means all these great things and all this hard work has gone into it, it says, let's sustain. And so if you ask, the Me Too movement or the Black Lives Matter, or, right now, what's happening in the Asian community, do they want to sustain? Is sustainability a good thing? I think the answer is going to come back and say, no, we need to regenerate these systems. And so that is what I like about regeneration, is when the word regeneration in and of itself asks you to kind of rebuild, make better, find better solutions than just sustaining it. As far as the other point that you brought up, Tal, is doing good selfish? I mean, if you ask my 18-year-old or now 20-year-old son, he would tell you all altruism is selfish. It's really just for the benefit of that individual. So, to say that you're being regenerative for altruistic reasons and that's a bad thing, it's like, forget it. From a moral, position, that question becomes irrelevant to somebody like him. So I hope that answers the question.
It's a wonderful way of looking at it, because in that sense, both of what you just said and Erik is, if we do whatever we do from an inner core rather than some sort of a futuristic, utopian concept of what the world will be like when we are not here, it's a much stronger backbone to push ahead with. It's much easier to stay the fight if you do it for yourself than if you do it for some altruistic, future imaginary reason.
Yeah, but, and just to add to that, it's not a binary sort of thing. It's not just it's not one or the other. You can be worried about yourself and your own, and at the same time be considering the future as well. And so this is the benefit of some of these actions. I just want to go to David's point. I think words are really important, but I think actions are what people are thinking about at the moment. They want to do things. And I agree, words are important, and it's time that we gave some new energy to the sustainability movement. I think that's what Regenerative is doing, and that's exciting.
But it's interesting that you look at it this way. I was just thinking, listening to David, when I was born, it was still that time that the best gift a newborn baby would be given is planting a tree. And I still have some of those, cards that we received as, there's a tree planted on your name and another tree planted. And that's a beautiful thing. Who knew the word regeneration? I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but that's what people were actually doing culturally. It's not just, it's as a culture, this was the right thing to do. So whether or not it was on a personal level, it was definitely foreseen. It was definitely something into the future.
So Tal, imagine visiting that tree or those trees that were planted.
I have. I actually have done that.
And what is that like? Tell me what that is like.
Okay, I will. It wasn't part of this talk, but I will. Because what I did is when I was 13, there was another sort of wave of planting trees for me because I'm 13. And those documents that you get actually mark the place where the tree is. So what I did at 13 is I went to see the trees that were planted when I was born. I found, I think, 6 or 7 of them. And it was such an amazing experience because I was walking on it was a mountain slope, happened to be a mountain slope, where my trees were planted. That was totally barren in the pictures that I had on the card that I got when I was born. And I was walking in a forest looking for trees. And it was such a strong experience because that all the trees around you, every single tree is planted for a person. Every single tree has a name. And you're walking that forest looking for your own trees that were planted by other people for you. And it's like a whole community of people around. So it's a very, very strong experience. And if I go back to that time, I'm pretty certain that it was part of the push that I got to take the journey in life that I took further on, that it's sustainability and regeneration is part of it. And if I add to this, David, you went back to Chief Seattle. I'm going to do it again, but from a different angle. In one of the previous talks that I held in recent weeks, I spoke to Bill Reed from Regenerative. I guess we all know him. And Bill said something that resonated with me really deeply. He said, it is time for all of us to become indigenous again. And, you'd wonder, I think sustainability and regeneration may be lessons that we learn from natural living, that a Chief Seattle can say. But once industry and technology factor in, those natural lessons, don't they withdraw in the face of comfort and ease and ingenuity and overconsumption and abundance of choices, etc.? Can we actually learn and practice those natural lessons on a global level today? Or do we have to wait until there's a larger portion of humanity have access to all those fruits of industry and technology and realizes the costs that come with it, and only then a real embedded change will happen? Where do you stand with that? Because, it's easy to look at those things from the inside. We are all involved in that, process of sustainability and regeneration to a certain extent, each one of us from a different angle. But are we the few who hug trees, or do we actually represent a much, much larger movement?
I think I'm answering here without kind of, isn't it like 62 or 63% of the population of the world is living in big cities now? And that it's still increasing, and some predicts that it might go even a little bit slower than predicted because of technology, and COVID maybe accelerated the tools that that you could still live on the countryside. But when you mentioned the indigenous, I think the core of our little island out in the ocean, far out, the future home of the Lighthouse Masters, the whole essence of that, the value that we are creating for our guests is to rub them against nature. And I think if you kind of grew up in London with you exit your house, it's tarmac, and you have only arranged parks, and you want to buy seafood, you go to Harrods, and that's where it comes from. I think it's a very strong experience. It can be a very strong experience, and I also feel more and more when I spend time with guests, taking them out fishing, just 50 meters from the actual island, and we catch a lot of mackerel, and then we fillet it on the boat, and we eat it as sashimi immediately. And we use the waste to put in the crab pots to catch crabs. And I think that to show them, that's somehow to take them a little bit closer to indigenous, or to at least back to where it all began. And that's at least my gut feeling, that this is the real value. From the beginning, you think it's like the things that that you would buy in a traditional luxurious hotel, but it's nothing about that at all. That's at least my point of view and experience.
So I think you set up about 3 questions there, Tal. Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's good, because it's whole system thinking and everything's connected in a regenerative model. So Jonathon, thank you for bringing up the point that it's not just about the paradigm shift and a change of thinking, but it's how that thinking then affects your actions. So I think related to what you're saying there, Tal, the first thing is, we all have to take those actions and how we act in a personal way. The change happens from a bottom-up, top-down way. And so we have to show up, and then eventually when enough of us show up, there's a cascade of change. There's you reach that tipping point. And tech does make things easy. You can make all the plastic bags in the world, so you don't have to remember to take your reusable bags and put them in your car and take them with you. But if you just take that personal action, then you don't need that technology that made things easy. I think the other question that you asked, and the other part of that is, you can have all of the luxury and none of the guilt if you're willing to take some extra steps there that really don't take that much effort. The other one is your question about skipping technology. And I think we saw this a lot in Eastern Europe. You can skip huge chunks of technology and just go right into a new stage. And so I don't think everybody else has to go through all the pain to get to where they need to be, especially if we're talking about going back to where we started. It's probably easier for them not to do that. Now, the question is do they deserve it? Do they deserve to have all those plastic bags, all those all that convenience of technology? And I think the other part of this is kind of part of the paradigm shift in regeneration. I think you'll hear Phil Reed talk about this, is moving from scarcity and extraction to more about abundance and investing in local sense and local community. And your tree example was such a beautiful example of that. And so I think it's refocusing on regeneration into that model and that paradigm, and you can achieve all the things that you described without all the pain. So I hope that makes sense.
What a beautifully positive approach. Jonathon,
there's so many threads here to pick up on, and one of them, is our relationship to the places that we visit. So often we consume a place and then we leave, and we dust off our hands and we're gone, as opposed to thinking about, well, how could I make this better? And then could I come back to it later at some point in my life and see the benefit of what I have done, the tree that I had planted, or the social issue that I have. So I think that there's that element of it, that connecting to the world. And to Erik's point, one of the great challenges for us as we move to these urban lifestyles is our disconnection with so many of the systems that we rely on, from our cultural systems. Cities have a different, don't have that same cultural connectivity, that social capital. Our environmental systems, we're disconnected. We can live our lives without really thinking about the environment in which we're living. And, this is one of our challenges. If we're going to live in cities, we need to find ways to reconnect. The other thing that sort of comes out of this conversation is, and as the token academic in this conversation, is that we fight our battles with almost both arms tied behind our back, because we rely so much on this one way of thinking. As an academic, there's a scientific process that comes from a historical background, that this is the way we solve problems. And often that means that we're not thinking about the whole system. It means that we're breaking problems down into little bits. But it also means that we're not paying attention to the wisdom of Indigenous people. Our knowledge comes from one place, and it often doesn't come from, those, the lore and the understanding and the wisdom. And I think if we really want to solve these problems, then we need to find a way to embrace that wisdom, so that we can not only have the scientific technique, that's important, and it's got us this far, but we need to open our mind to other ways of looking at the world and seeing things and relating to nature and humanity. And if we don't, we end up fighting the war with one arm tied behind our back. And I think the time has long come for us to sort of think more broadly about what is wisdom and what is knowledge, and how we can apply it.
It's interesting, because I'm listening to the three of you, and the feeling that I get is that we're talking about alienation more than anything else. We're talking about the fact that, okay, if we are all moving to be urban creatures, then we alienate ourselves from experiences, from emotions, from notions, from historical, cultural backgrounds, whichever way we want to take it, that we actually think are important for us, that we want to entertain, that we want to have as part of our lives. Because I could be very blunt and reverse the question back to you, Jonathon, when you say we have to do sustainability and regeneration. I go, why do we? What do we care? So the world runs to an end in a few thousand years. Who cares? So, and I take us back to what Erik and David said before. It's all this inner need. It's all this very egoistic drive of doing the right thing for ourselves. So who cares a few thousand years ahead? But it's not true, because we are talking about the fact that we live today, we do whatever we do today, and we are still alienated from something that haven't yet happened, but we already feel that we are alienated from. There was a very interesting paper that I read that was introduced by two researchers in a conference that was held in Finland, I think 7 years ago. And it introduces design for subjective well-being. And what I found very interesting there, it cites empirical studies which show that long-term happiness is less a matter of one's circumstances and more of the activities a person is involved in, which is very interesting, because activities is a choice. Circumstances may be foisted on us to an extent. They claim that environments can be designed to stimulate experiences that provide pleasure and meaning. Now, I was listening now, and I was thinking, Erik told me that story of how they ask their guests who are paying handsomely to stay on that beautiful Pater Noster tiny little hotel on the island. and are used to stay in Four Seasons and Mandarins and so on and so forth, they ask them to bring back their wine bottles and throw their trash themselves. And nobody complains. Guests are happy, right? Erik, you can tell us the story. I'm just repeating it, but there's a notion, Paternoster was an existing cluster of structures when you decided to turn it into a hotel. David, Playa Viva was tabula rasa, pretty much, right? When you decided to turn it into a hotel.
Yeah, coconut grass.
I was going through the comments that, that guests leave on both your sites, and there's a unique overtone of a spiritual experience, which is, you'll agree with me, it's very uncommon for guests to leave following hotel stays. And it made me think, how did each of you approach the design of the unique hotels that you've created? And to what extent was that mental well-being of future guests part of the thinking?
I think I could try to answer. And I feel actually more and more, it might be funny coming from a hotel designer, but it's that the design was to 99% already done there. There were like a magical aura to this the home of the lighthouse masters and the island and how far away it was. That was the reason why we jumped on it. It's like an impossible task somehow, because it's so many hurdles and problems as from a traditional hotel operations point of view. But I noticed when I came to the island that the whole place was emphasize on my amplifier on my senses. So I felt that, the jacket I was wearing, it looked different there than it did back in town. And that made me think, I have a background, I went to art school. So, on the other side, I do my art. And it's one of my dear kind of hobbies. And that made me think that an art exhibition in town, in a gallery, in a chic gallery, would be experienced totally different out here. So that made us wanting to, having experiments about making this place as an amplifier for various kind of cultures. So one of the first kind of venture we jumped into was the collaboration with the Gothenburg Film Festival. And they came up with a beautiful idea after they decided that the festival was going to be totally digital this year. And the whole idea with the film festival is people coming together, having a beer and watching movies and discussing it and maybe meeting the director and all these things. But they said that we wanted to experiment with this, and we'll have one real seat, and that's going to be on your island, and it's going to be for 7 days for one person, being alone, without telephone, without Wi-Fi, and only watching the program of our movie, and maybe get a call from the director before and discuss the movie, and they had this kind of ad to try to find this person, and I think it was at the end more than 12,000 people from 48 different countries that applied, and they picked in the end a COVID nurse from Skövde, a small city in the middle of Sweden, and she had her appliance letter opening with, I'm really tired because I've been comforting dying people for half a year, and the only way I can kind of get away from it all is to dive into a movie. I really love movies, and so she was chosen, and it was like an extreme kind of media attention on this, and she was interviewed. She did a video blog during the day, so she was there alone for 7 days. But the funny thing happened after, because we started to get requests from guests that wanted, can I come to your island with my family, and will you lock in our cell phones for the week we're there? So that's another kind of spotlight of what's important for people. And I think Jonathon said reconnection before. I think it's regenerative, and reconnection is somehow very related, or even the same thing. And talking about, luxury, maybe luxury is but what is real benefit for people? Maybe it's being able to talk to the kids again, or forced. So now we're selling these weekend packages. That we have this safe lock with two days. You put this phone in and you can't open it in 2 days, and the things that are happening on the dinners are really interesting. And you can also curate that, as an art. You're having, if you put a family with the parents are from banking industry, put it together with an artist, and what kind of conversation will that lead to? And it's really funny because tapping back to indigenous that you said before, because there is something lost, in the society that we're living in, that's very important for people. And I think we accidentally kind of ended up there and understanding more and more what is actually our product. It's something else than a hotel, or something else than, like a weekend getaway. It's more profound, and maybe it's getting back to the true roots and the people that evolution taught us for like 500,000 years, and suddenly it changed, and we want to go back there somehow.
Erik, I want to go to your island. Okay.
Yeah. Can I lock your phone up then?
Oh, you could take it before I even get there. Okay. Just leave me with a camera, because I love taking pictures.
Yeah. We had a ship that it was kind of a severe storm a month ago, and there was a ship anchoring outside, and it drifted, and it took our current or electrical cable. It's going underwater, so we were without current for 3 days, I think.
Oh, that's even better. So,
yeah.
So to address the question, I kind of have 3 quick thoughts on that. One is our Wi-Fi password, because we do have Wi-Fi because people like to work remotely, but our Wi-Fi password is disconnect to reconnect. So Jonathan, words matter, okay? And the other one is, one thing that our own guest brought up to us is, people that stay there for 2 weeks said, I noticed that, after it takes 24 or 48 hours of being at Playa Viva, and then you see the look on people's face. They called it the Playa Valium. The Playa Valium kicks in, okay? With the women, it's like the hair is just pulled back. There's no makeup. It's just so natural. People shine. And I think a lot of that really comes from creating a luxury experience that's immersed in nature. And we as human beings begin to connect and reconnect back to nature again. We know where the sun, what time it rises, when it sets, where the moon is in the phase. I can go on and on about that. I think the other thing, Tal, to answer your question, is we built Playa Viva to align with our values. And the first step that we took before we even put pen to paper and designed anything there was to decide on a agreed upon set of core principles. This is, we lost Tal, but I'll finish my point for you guys. The first thing that we did was develop a set of core principles, and those were cleaner and more transparent, more abundant air, water, energy, and waste streams. After that, it was creating meaningful experience, promoting biodiversity, creating transformational experiences, and creating a living legacy, which is that 7th generation, think about those trees and down the line. And so those core values, those core principles really drove the entire design of how we do what we do. And it translates to our employees, and it translates to the entire experience. So
I think you're both experienced designers. You might see yourself as embedded in the real estate or the hotel design itself, but the hotel design is just part of a bigger experience design that you're creating. And I don't think it should be lost that the 2 really important trends from the last 12 months have been this conversation about regenerative tourism, but there's another theme that's sort of bubbling up, and it's this idea of transformational tourism. And it takes that idea of, people who travel, and it's designed to truly transform them, to make them better than they are before they go. It's almost regenerative for the person, right? And, I think that these two things sort of align very much together as we're sitting here going, well, how do I make my next trip meaningful to me as a person, as
But
well
I,
as,
Jonathan, I would add something important there too, because if regeneration is just about me and not about my connection to place and people and ecosystem and everything else, then I think we've lost a very, very big part of that. So I agree that the transformational experience happens to person, but it is reciprocal, which I think is a very important part of regeneration, and it is co-evolutionary, which is a big part of regeneration. And
I totally
that needs
agree.
to be kept in mind.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm just seeing these as two separate streams that intertwine in this conversation at the moment, because there is a group of folks who are talking about transformational tourism at the moment, and there's folks like ourselves who are talking about
I think Jake and the whole Transformational Tourism Council are doing some great work. But I think it definitely needs to be taken in the context that if we're going to be regenerative, we need to move beyond the ego to the eco. There's a wonderful kind of triangle showing humans believing themselves at the top and then everything else below that, and we have dominion over that, or humans being part of and stewards of this entire ecosystem, but that it's a whole system and that we fit within it and we play within it. And I think if we think from an ego perspective as opposed to an eco perspective, then we're not going to get to a regenerative perspective. And I agree that transformation is a big part of it.
Yeah, but totally to agree with the point that you're making, and coming back to what Tal was talking about, this word alienated. One of the things that I think is sort of a theme from our conversation here is this idea of connecting with larger systems, and what both your experiences allow people to do is to connect with that larger system, their impact on how they can make a small part of the world better, or a big part of the world better through their actions and their connectivity to it. If some urban life disconnects us from the systems that we're engaged with, the environment, culture, then some experiences, like I think the ones that you create, and I'm not an expert on your business, but like the ones that you create, can reconnect us with the systems and the culture and the environment.
But I do want to throw something in here, which is I don't want it to seem like you have to be on a tiny little island or in a tiny little place like Playa Viva to be regenerative. I'm a huge fan of cities. I think cities can be extremely efficient. They can connect people in an incredible way. Art, everything that cities have to offer. So I don't think it's an either or proposition. It can be inclusive and it can move in that way. And
the challenge is to scale it.
But I think that it's scaling anyway, because if you think about it, it's all of how it is embedded in cultures, because at the end of the day, all this communication is done through the narratives that, yes, they may be created on a personal level, but then they're shared and communicated. And that's what creates our culture. And I happen to have spent the last 25 years building infrastructures and methodologies exactly for that, to support cultural sustainability and regeneration. And I sort of started on a global level of young artists. And then I found myself, after the overall narrative was in place, that I can actually go deeper into each location anywhere in the world. And it could be an urban environment. It could be, just a community of 6 families in the middle of a jungle, and bring out those voices of a culture. And if I learned how to give them a platform, if I could build the infrastructure that will share and communicate what it is that they experience, then a culture happens by itself. It's pretty amazing. You know, it's like magic happening. Culture happens just by sharing narratives. So I think between what you're saying, David, and you saying, Jonathon, there is exactly that platform. Yes, there is the personal experience and transformation and so on and so forth as part of tourism. And yes, there are those structures wherever you visit that are local cultures. But by visiting them and maybe going through some sort of a transformation, you take the narrative and you share it somewhere else, and you connect to cultures by doing that.
Mm.
And to that extent, projects like Playa Viva, like Paternoster, they're wonderful because their narrative is so strong that you want to share it. Whether or not we've not even been there, right? We haven't yet been in any of those two, Jonathon, but we are talking about this now as if we are already part of the narrative that was created somewhere else, just because the story is that strong. So I think that we cannot disjoint, you know, David, you're talking about ego and eco. We cannot disjoint the ecological sustainability and regeneration from the cultural one, because at the end of the day, it's us doing it. It's not the monkeys and the snakes, and they do it anyway. Yeah, they don't need talking, and they don't need, you know, screens to discuss this for. We do. So, and we are the culture. So it is the cultural sustainability that I believe we should invest in heavily, so that there is sort of an inner power that makes us want to create those, you know, go to the ends of the world and do those projects, and then go visit those ends of the world and take our garbage ourselves and throw it and tell the story when we get back home and share it on social media and so on and so forth. So to that extent, there is no difference between an urban environment and a jungle. It's all within the same narrative.
Yes.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. You know, the takeout from this for anyone who's listening to it shouldn't be that I want to do something that's exactly the same as what David or Erik have done. It should be, you know, how can I be inspired by this work and bring it back to my own community or my own operation? And, you know, whether that's in a city or whether it's in a, you know, a remote location, you know, the way that we scale this, the way that we embed this into our system is by people being inspired and then applying it in their own applications, applying it themselves in ways that make sense to them.
I really think we have something within us, a drive for making things better or fixing problems. And somebody told me once that the driver behind the mechanism behind a crime series on TV or a film, you know, is you're glued because you want to see the solution, that people get happy and the bad guy got hurt somehow. So I really believe in humanity. So I think that doing it for like a egoistic reason, it's also good, because it doesn't mean that you only do it for yourself. It means that I feel good because it makes sense for a lot of people. People maybe will learn something, and it will make sense for my children's grandchildren also. So that makes me feel good. I really think it's. I recently read the new book of Bill Gates about the solution for, you know, he has presented a solution for climate change somehow, and he says that the strongest kind of thing you can do is to show your consumer power of doing the right choices when you're in the shop, or when you sign a deal with the electrical company, you know, for your house and stuff like that. That's extremely strong, and it sends a signal straight up to the boardroom of the big companies that, you know, what kind of path are we going to do. So so I think I feel that it's almost the same thing, you know. For me to feel, if I feel good, I'm also maybe an egoistic guy, but if it feels good in my gut, then I think it's because it's good for the greater good somehow.
David, can I take you back for a second to that? I think it was the second out of the 5 principles that you set
Yes.
up with Playa Viva. They promote a meaningful community. How does that tie into what was just said here? What is a meaningful community?
Well, you know, we break meaningful community down in many ways, because there's the meaningful community that's created between the guests who are there. There's the meaningful community between the guests and the staff, and how that's curated so that they have connection to an immediate local group. There's the landscape and the local community outside of the hotel and all the way up the watershed. And that's kind of our role, is to help immerse that guest deeper and deeper and have a connection to that place. There's a meaningful community of folks who haven't been to Playa Viva yet, who see it from the outside and are part of it and want to be a part of it. I would say, for me to wrap it up, somebody that I've taken a lot of inspiration from recently is Zita Cobb in Fogo Island. And in a presentation, she used the term, humans are meaning-seeking beings. And so much of our meaning comes from storytelling and having authentic experiences, and the cultural exchange that happens there, and the bilateral nature of it. And that's part of the meaningful community. You know, I just had some folks in the travel industry come and stay at Playa Viva. And there's this thing that I call the big table. You know, our meals are served family style. Everybody sits around big tables. COVID has changed a bit, but anyway. And people meet and converse, because once you break bread with somebody, once you sit around the fire and you say, you know, pass the tortillas and what's your story? And the sharing that happens there, that's the beginning of it. And then it's how do you extend it beyond there? Like, our staff don't wear uniforms per se with name tags that kind of create class there. They're there like every other guest. They're just helping you out through that process. And you need to ask each other name. What's your name? What's your name? And get to know each other, and then ask that same question again. And so those are the roots of creating meaningful community. And it goes back to, you know, I think what we're all talking about, just why do we travel? We travel to understand a different culture, to understand something about ourselves, to know that that other person, you know, in Mexico isn't, excuse me, a rapist or a killer, whatever, that they're a great person, and that they care about their community, their family, their education, just like you care about your family, your kids' education, everything else. So that's part of creating meaningful community.
You know, I think it was Aldous Huxley. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Aldous Huxley who said that to travel is to discover that everyone is wrong about other countries. I think that it's a great lesson, and I've learned it so many times going to places where the news showed me that it's a horrendous place and you absolutely shouldn't go there, and you go there and it's the most beautiful human experience you've ever experienced. I know we have to wrap up, and I will wrap up. Although I could have gone with this for a long time now, but I think that one of the things that I'm taking with me from this talk is the notion, and David, maybe you've just described the most cocoon type of a meaningful community, and even within this cocoon, you kept expanding it. You know, when we curate collections for hotels or cruise ships, and what we try to do is bring the culture where the building is situated, or the destinations that the ships are going to visit. I always say that don't look at the outer walls of the project as the skin, because in today's world, social media had enabled us to expand the skin as far as we want to go. So you can take that meaningful community from this tiny interaction between two people sitting at a table, or 16 people sitting at a table in a little place in Mexico. But if the story is good, then you can expand the skin endlessly, really endlessly. And the wonderful thing about it is that it vibrates, so it comes back. You know, it's not just going one way, it continuously goes everywhere. And that create that cultural sustainability and regeneration that we are talking about. So if we are all careful, and we create those genuine stories, and we do it the right way, and we are as selfish as we want, but we're selfishly doing the right thing, it will resonate right. It will just go the right way, and it will come back to us, and it pays back. And it was wonderful to hear it from the three of you, and it's wonderful to share all this. And hopefully the next talk we are going to do either on Erik's island or David's jungle. We will.
I want to go to Mexico.
I'm planting the seeds.
Yeah.
Okay, so gentlemen, thank you very much. It was really a pleasure. And,
thank you, Tal. Jonathon, pleasure to meet you, and Erik as well.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
And thank you everyone for tuning to Sea Trade Cruise Talks about this time, about responsible tourism and regenerative travel. I hope you enjoyed it, and looking forward to see everybody in one of the next talks.